Okay, friends, welcome back. Today we're looking at lesson 30, and I'll have you notice our objective. It tells us that we are going to divide decimal dividends by non-unit decimal divisors. So before we talk about what that means, I just want to review a little bit of vocabulary for you. When we have a division sentence, we always have the dividend divided by the divisor, and that equals the quotient. Okay, so that is if I wanted any number divided by another number, I can set it up in the house where the number here, B, the second number, is what goes on the outside, and the A is what's going to go inside the house. Then finally, we've learned that I can also represent this as A over B, because a fraction is just a division problem. So when we talk about dividing decimal dividends, that means that our first number is going to have a decimal. We saw that introduced in lesson 29, so that's nothing new for us. By a non-unit decimal divisor. So we had decimal divisors in our last lesson, lesson 29, where it was things like dividing by 0.1, and so we worked through those. So today we're going to look at non-unit, which means ones that are not going to be just all nice and neat with a 0.1 or 0.01 in the tenths and hundredths. So let's do a quick review. We're going to start here with problem 1. And I'll label this letter A. And I have 2 divided by 0.01. All right. So yesterday in our lesson, we took the 2 and we changed that decimal, to a fraction. And because we've become mathematical experts at dividing a whole number by a fraction, we just learned that the answer, the quotient, was going to be 20. Today, we're going to use the schema that we have to approach this another way. Okay? So how I want you to think about this is now we're going to use this idea to write this number sentence as a fraction. So that means if I have 2 divided by 1/10, I can label this A and I can label this B, and then I can use my formula here, and my my fraction would be 2 over 1/10. I know, that's mind-blowing. I bet you've never seen a fraction with a decimal in it before. So what we're going to try to do is to get rid of that decimal, because you're right, even though it looks funny and it is allowed, we don't want to have to work with it. So we want to get rid of it. So I'm going to come back to the place value sheet that we used at the beginning of the year. And if you remember, when we use this place value sheet, what we would do is we would put our number. So for example, here is my decimal. And in this case, our decimal is 0.1 or 1/10. Now, I want to get rid of that decimal, which means that I want to move this from the decimal place value to the whole number. When I do that, I don't count that decimal line. I have jumped 1 place value. I have moved my digit 1 place value, which means that its value increased 10 times. So it went from 0.1 or 1/10 to now 1 whole. And so when we think about what that means, It means that if I take this value here, no matter what this value is going to be in my denominator, and I multiply it by 10, I'm going to get 1 as my denominator now. But we've also learned that what you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So we're creating an equivalent fraction here. I know that it's equivalent because anytime I multiply a fraction by another fraction that's equal to 1, it looks different, but the value is the same. Okay, so 2 and 1/10, 2 over 1/10 is the same thing as 20 over 1. So when I take that and I solve it, that gives me the answer of 20, which is what my answer was when I did it the first way up here. So I'm going to check that off. That matches up. So I'm using my previous schema to help me better understand this new way of doing things. So let's take a look here at letter B. Here I have my 2 again, but this time instead of that unit decimal, it's going to change to 2/10. All right, my job is still the same. I still want to rewrite this as a fraction. So I can again label this A, label this B. I can come back up to my notes. A goes on top and B goes on the bottom. All right, I would like to get rid of this decimal down here on the bottom. Whoops, sorry, I'm looking through my camera and trying to look around. So I would like to get rid of that decimal by making that a whole number. So if I come back to my decimal sheet, and I did have the decimal 2/10, what can I multiply that by to get the whole number 2? How many place values have I moved? I've moved 1 place value, and every time I move, I'm going to increase 10 times. So 2/10 times 10 equals 2. So I'm going to bring that back to this sheet. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 10. And when I do that, I get a numerator of 20 and a denominator of 10. Now up here, my denominator was 1, so I didn't have to do any more work. I was already, here I'm going to have to go ahead because this is an improper fraction. I'm going to have to turn it in to either a whole number or a mixed number. So I look to see how many times 2 goes into 20. If I count by 2s, 2 goes into 20 10 times. There's no remainder. It's just even. So 2 divided by 2/10 equals 10. So moving on and looking at another one, I have 2 4/10 divided by 2/10. So what we're going to do here is we're going to again change it to a fraction, 2.4 over 2/10. When I do this work, I can again come back to here. I've still got my 0.2. I knew that I multiplied that by 10 already. I've already done that work. So multiply by 10 over 10, or just 1 whole really. And when I do that, I had 2.4 4. So not only am I going to shift my denominator, but I got to figure out this numerator as well. So when I multiply by 10, everything shifts one row. So my 2 would be here in the tens, and my 4 would be here in the ones. So what number does that actually give me? Right, 24, because it's a whole number in front of the decimal now. So 2.4, or 2 and 4 tenths times 10, is just 24. We've already done the work to know that 2 tenths times 10 is just 2. So again, I have my improper fraction here. I want to figure out how many times 2 goes into 24. I know 2 goes into 20 10 times. And then I have 2, 4. So 10 plus 2, that would give me an even 12. All right, so take a minute and look over the pattern that you're seeing so far. What do you notice? So if I had 1 and 2 tenths divided by 1/10, my answer would be 12. If I had 8 tenths divided by 1/10, whoops, I'm sorry, my answer would be 8. So hopefully you're starting to see the pattern emerging when you're multiplying, or I'm sorry, when you're dividing by the tenths. All right, so we're going to take a look here at one more. All right, and this time we're going to take a look at 2 and 4 tenths divided by 4 tenths. So if I take this and set it up as a fraction, I have learned that because we are working with a value in the tenths place, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to multiply that numerator and that denominator by 10. When I do that on my place value chart, everything moves one column over on the place value. And so I get 24 divided by 4. 5 times 4 is 20. So one more 4 would be 6. That would be my answer. And of course, I can always check my answer with multiplication. So I take my quotient times my divisor. I'm going to multiply straight across. 24 over 10, so 24 tenths, which is 2.4. So it does check out. All right. So let's change gears here and let's move from the tenths and let's see what happens when we look at problem 2 here. And letter A is going to be 1 6/10 divided by 4 hundredths. We're in the hundredths place value now. So I want you to take just a second here and think about using what we just used in problem A. How might we attack problem set 2 here? Okay, so I'm going to again come back to my place value chart. And we are now working in the hundredths. No matter what place value is in our denominator, we always want to have that as a whole number. So that means that I want to rewrite this as a fraction. And I don't want 4 hundredths in my denominator. I want to get rid of that. I want to make it a whole number. So in order to make 4 hundredths a whole number, I have to shift it 1 time. I have to shift it 2 times. So every time I jump a place value, I'm multiplying by 10. So here I would have gotten 4 tenths. Here I would have gotten 4 as a whole, so I've multiplied 4 by 10 times 10 is 100. So when we were multiplying with a denominator that had a value in the tenths place, when we shift to the hundredths place, we're going to multiply that by 100. I bet you guys figured that out. You're a rocket scientist. You've got this. When I do that, like I said, I put it on that place value chart and I move it over. So 4 hundredths times 100 is just 4. But then I have my 1.6. So I'm going to come back up here and I'm multiplying it by 100. So if I just move it 1 column, I've only multiplied it by 10. So my 1 can't go there. My 1 has to go here. And my 6 has to go here. That leaves nothing in my 1's column, so I'm going to add a 0. So when I have that 1 6 tenths times 100, I'm actually going to get a product of 160. Because I had to move the place value 2 times. If you still have this sheet, you can pull it out and use it. It's a great resource to go back and revisit. If you've lost it, you can tell that I just made one right here on a piece of notebook paper. You could put it in your packet that you got for math with your dry erase board on the back, and you can still use it that way. So I'm still not quite finished though, because I can't leave this as 160 over 4. So I'm going to figure out the quotient here for that. 4 goes in, doesn't go into 1, so I'm going to put a 0 above that 1. So now I've got to look next door at 16. How many times does 4 go into 16? Well, it goes 4 times. 4, 8, 12, 16. It goes in evenly. So I've got 0 there, but I still have to bring that 0 down. And even with that 0 down, I still have to make sure that I have a part of a quotient above that 0. So I have to ask myself, how many times does 4 go into 0? And the answer there is 0 times. And now I'm done, because every digit in my dividend has a number above it. So the answer, the quotient for this problem would be 40. All right, so let's go ahead and let's try another one. I have letter B here, and we have 1 68 hundredths. So now they're throwing in even a bigger dividend for us there. Divided by 4 hundredths. Okay, so I'm going to use the same strategy that I used up here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make this into a fraction. 0, 4. Okay, I'm going to check to see what place value am I working with. Tenths, hundredths. So since I'm working in the hundredths, I need to multiply and find that fraction that is equivalent to 1 68/100 over 4/100. So I'm going to multiply 100 to do that. All right. I know from my previous work up here, I'm not going to retrace my steps, that my denominator is now going to be 4. Now this 1 68/100. Oh, I'm running out of room. 1 68/100. So I'm going to multiply this again times 100. So my 8's not going to go to my tenths. My 8 is going to go to my ones, which means my 6 is going to go to my tens place, and my 1 is then going to go to my hundreds place. So that becomes 168. All right, that's a big number to do long division with, but if I look, I took 4 into 160 right here. What if that was an 8 instead of a 0? So then I would take 4 into 8 2 times. Let me work that out for you so you can see what I'm talking about. I decided up here that 4 does not go into 1. 4 can go into 16 4 times evenly. Oops, I put 6. There we go, sorry. And then I have to bring down my 8. 4 goes into 8 2 times. And now I'm finished because each digit in my dividend has a digit above it. So my answer here is 42. All right. Letter C. I have 1 and 68/100 divided by 12/100. So again, I'm going to set that up as my fraction. I can still keep labeling if I want to. A over B. All right. I'm working in the tenths, hundredths. I'm always going to my denominator to determine what place value I'm going to multiply by. The numerator isn't as big of a deal. We don't want a decimal in the denominator though. So since I'm in the hundredths place, I'm going to multiply by hundredths. What do you think I'm going to get here? I have a 2-digit number. If I come up here, I have 0.04 and my answer became 4. Here, my answer will become, my quotient, I'm multiplying, my product will become 12. And here, if I put that on and I slide them to place values, my answer becomes 168. All right, now I haven't done this kind of math, so I'm going to have to actually work it out. All right, so 12, I cannot take and make a group of 12 if I only have 1 hundredths block. So I would have to take that hundredths block and break it up and get 16 tens blocks, 16 tens. I can pull out one group of 12 when I do that. So when I make that group of 12, I'll pull it away and I'm left with 4 tens. Then I'm going to bring down my ones. Well, since I couldn't do anything with those tens, I'm going to break them up into ones, and that gives me a total of 48 ones, which makes sense because now I'm working in my ones column. So 12 goes into 48 4 times. And so my answer, my quotient, is 14. Okay, so hopefully you followed along with me. If not, you can go back, you can rewind, you can use that power of pause to make sure that you're seeking to understand. my next video, I will post the problem set. I'll work through those with you so that when you come in to do the homework, you have that model with you to help you work through it. If you have any questions, make sure you make notes in your notebook and bring it with you to class tomorrow so that we can talk about it. All right, mathematicians, great work and have a good night.